Many of us have some fantastic childhood memories, and if you grew up in Belfast or any other part of the north for that matter, chances are some of those memories may be tainted in tragedy. Now, West Belfast born journalist and broadcaster Alix O'Neill has put pen to paper to bring us her memoir of life in Andytown in the 80s and 90s. And I'm delighted to say that Alix can join us now to discuss everything that is in her book, from her unorthodox family to boys, booze, and well, boyzone. Alix, it is great to get chatting with you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I am fantastic, thank you. So let's just begin a little bit about the book. Now, you wrote the book in Belfast, and it's my understanding that that wasn't necessarily what you had planned. How did that come about?
So we live in France. We moved here about 2 years ago, and we came back to visit my parents for a couple of weeks. It was just meant to be a 3-4 week stay, and then of course coronavirus happened, and we got stuck for 4 months in my parents' house. So yeah, the vast majority of the book was written in my just about in the office above my parents' garage. With my husband by my side, and he was doing his work in one corner, and I was doing mine. So it was less notiony than I planned. I thought I'd be sitting in sunny south of France and yeah, just writing my book in the sun. But no, very different plans.
Not a bother. Um, What's inspired you to write this memoir? Obviously, throughout the book, we learn some of your family's story, but what was it that made you feel that this is something that needs told, that you need to put pen to paper and let people hear your family story?
Well, I think first of all, there's so many different narratives from the Troubles, and there's space for all of them. And I think in the past, you only ever really hear of the tragedy and the suffering of the Troubles, and I certainly don't want to minimize that, to minimize the tragedy of the Troubles. But I felt that there was, space for the other side of Belfast, that really dark sense of humor and the crack and the complexity and the otherness of Belfast. I wanted to show that there were lots of different stories to be told. And I do have quite an unusual family story, and I don't want to give away any spoilers from the book, but I felt my family was sufficiently bonkers that would be a good way in to tell that different side of Belfast. And I think as well, I've been living away from home since I was 18, so like 20 years now, and I was really surprised when I moved to Dublin to university first of all, and then over to London, how little people knew about Northern Ireland. And it was really bizarre, especially being in Dublin, and we were only 2 hours, up the road.
Mhm.
And they just had this image that we were kind of running around balaclavas all the time, and that was the only side of life in Northern Ireland. And so I wanted to show, the other side, the very normal side in many ways for a teenage girl growing up in the 90s.
And obviously, I think it's fair to say that this isn't a book about the Troubles, it's a book set in the
Mm.
Troubles. But throughout it, we see a timeline of events. For instance, you discuss the murder of Anne Ogilvy on Sandy Road. There's mention of the Miami Showband massacre, and more recently, the tragic murder of journalist Leila McKee in Derry. Do you think that it was important to include this timeline to anchor your family story and make it almost relatable so that people can understand the time frame that this was happening?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's one thing growing up and having no, I guess, direct experience of the Troubles, but it was always there. The violence was always there, bubbling around in the background, and I think that shapes your worldview on things. So even though I was really lucky that I never lost anyone I loved to the conflict, um, it was very much there. That violence was on our news every night. We knew people who were directly affected by it. There was a time that I was held back after school because the police were chasing masked gunmen across the hockey pitch. That's not your normal teenage experience. And I think, you know yourself, when you're from Northern Ireland, you tend to minimize things. You sort of think, sure, it wasn't that bad. And in the book, I talk about a time that there was the bombing in Parsons Green a couple of years ago, and nobody was hurt. And my colleague was quite upset about the whole thing, and I was trying to reassure her, and I said, "Sure, it was only a wee bomb in a little bag." And I think that's what you do when you're from Northern Ireland. You don't realise how much that conflict has shaped your view, has coloured your opinions, and it's a strange thing. So I think it was really important to include that amidst that kind of the silliness and the kind of the drama of being a teenage girl, that there was this darkness going on, and it couldn't help but penetrate your world. So yeah, it was very important to include both sides of my experience of growing up in the North.
Perfect. And obviously, throughout the book, we get introduced to your extended family. And like most families, we find out that there's been some disagreements, some falling out, and some estrangement. But are you aware of your family's reaction to having the story told in this book?
I haven't spoken. So obviously, my my immediate family, my mum, dad, and sister, delighted. They couldn't be more proud. And I wrote the book with their blessing. They were completely fine with it. Um, haven't spoken to everyone. From what I can gather, not everyone's delighted that I decided to share the family history, but I really thought long and hard before I did. I tried to make sure that it was very much telling it from my point of view and my mom, because it's very much my mum's story as well. And I didn't speculate too much about other members of the family or what they thought about things, and I kind of make that very clear in the book, that it's my recollection of things and my mum's point of view. So I hope my sister's getting married next year. So I if they show up, I guess I guess all's being forgiven. We'll see.
And it's funny that you should mention your mother. Your mother's quite a character within the book. I have to say, she's certainly someone that sounds like she'd be interesting to go for a drink with.
Well, she was known as the mad woman of Andytown, which tells you all you need to know, really. She chased a couple of lads down the street with a hurl one day because they one of them exposed themselves, took their penis out, and she was like, "I'll lob it off if you ever show yourself to my girls' game." So she was a formidable woman, but I think in many ways she sort of represents like the heart of Northern Ireland and its women, just no nonsense, strong, resilient, fierce mama bears that do what they need to do. But yeah, she's not a woman to be messed with.
Certainly, a lot of her character shines through in the colloquialisms that she uses, and some of her turn of phrases. Is that something that you have found that you've started to use in your own life?
Yes, it's really disturbing. I'm becoming my mom, especially with my own kids. I have two little boys, and sometimes I hear her just when I'm saying something, it slips out. But yeah, she had some really bizarre sayings. Things that she picked up from my granny. There's dressed up to the air of Willie Riley. That just means they look great. Or I'm like an Eaton House detective. Just means you're really hungry. Like really weird things. And the most bizarre one was "you're no goat's toe," which means you're not all that. So I've heard her say that many times over the years, and it really scared me the day that I turned around and said that to my husband. I thought, right, I'm turning into my ma.
Speaking of goats, there's also a mention of your family goats within the story, and taking the goat to vote, I think, was a highlight for me early on in the book. Do you want to explain a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, so they kept goats. We lived on the Glen Road until I was 7, and they wanted a bit of to recreate a slice of the good life. I think Mum was trying to channel Felicity Kendall, and they got some goats, and they named them, one of them Seamus after Seamus Heaney, and one of them Elizabeth after the Queen, so, an attempt to bridge the divide. And they got chicken and turkeys, and then one day my mum, she felt the need to do her civic duty, and didn't want to leave the goat behind, so she got my auntie to walk the goat. They put like a rope around the goat's neck and walked it up to, I think it was in St. Teresa's, was it? I can't remember where it is, but yeah, they took the goat voting with them.
And your parents obviously form quite a part of the story, and in particular your father. Now, many people will be aware of the ad, "Fred, there's no bread." I mean, I was born in 1997. I can still have visions of Olivia Nash opening the bread bin and being like, "Fred, there's no bread." Adverts have obviously formed quite a part of our history here in the North. Do you think that that is something that has informed your character, having your father created this advert, and which has formed quite an enormous part of our social history?
It is, isn't it? It's kind. I think that's the biggest thing that I think people from Northern Ireland who've read the book. That's the thing that they single out the most. They're like, "Your dad directed Bread. There's no bread." Um, yeah, it was great. It was iconic, really. It's but after I write that in the book as well. That after he directed it, he was just so delighted with himself. Everyone was like, "Oh, this is great, Mickey. This is fantastic. You really summed up Northern Ireland with this ad." So he got some ideas about himself and bought himself a vintage Jag that did what was it 12 miles to the gallon, and that wasn't really appreciated in Andy Town, as you can imagine. Everyone was like, catch yourself on, you cheat. So we traded it in for a Toyota.
And obviously, you also mentioned your mother's success within the book and her role within the Federation of Licensed Retailers.
Yeah.
One incident that comes across from that is the incident at Windor Park. And just want to discuss a wee bit about that and the impact that that had on your family.
Yeah, they were invited as guests of Guinness to watch the match. It was the World Cup qualifier, so it was I think it was '94. I'll just double check, but it was Republic of Ireland versus Northern Ireland, and the atmosphere leading up to the match had been really really tense. There was kind of a lot of bad blood between the managers of the two teams, and as a result, a lot of fans from the Republic of Ireland didn't go up to support the team, and that night, it was actually, I think it was turned into a play called A Night in November. It went down as a really bad night in Irish football history. But yeah, my mum and dad were there, and the atmosphere just really wasn't great when the teams walked onto the pitch. And she was standing up and cheering. She was like cheering for both sides. She's not doesn't big into football, but she cheered when anyone scored a goal. And this man who was sitting a few seats ahead of them just jumped up and just launched into a tirade of sectarian abuse. And I don't know how he knew she was a Catholic, but yeah, it got really nasty. My mum and dad had to leave, along with a lot of other people who'd suffered abuse as well. And it was a real nasty night and a real sort of stain in Irish football. And I remember some of the lads from the Republic of Ireland team afterwards had said it was terrifying because they were on the bus surrounded by armed guards. So yeah, the whole thing was pretty tense, and it was yeah, Dad still hasn't been back to a match in Windor Park. He finds it too difficult.
And throughout the book, we get a sense of someone who is coming to terms with their identity in yourself. For instance, you discussed the first time that you felt Irish seeing Riverdance at Eurovision, and then later on when you go off to Dublin to university and realizing that perhaps being Northern Irish is different in a sense of being Irish. Have you come to terms with that now that you've obviously lived in London, now you're in France? Is that something that you like? How does that come about for you? Yeah.
So when I'm away from Ireland, I always say I'm Irish. We went for a meal recently here in our local town, and they didn't take our names, so I went to remind the girl. I was like, "Oh, well, just give you my name." She's like, "Oh, it's okay. I put you down as Les Anglais," and I was like, "Oh, no, we're not English. We're Irish." It's very important, I think, when you're over here, you've got that sort of. I feel very comfortable in my Irish identity, but I realize that when I'm in Ireland, it's different. I realized pretty quickly when I moved to Dublin that people in the south didn't see me as Irish in the same way. So we didn't share the same cultural reference points. We just grew up in very different ways. And at first that really bothered me because I was like, who are you to tell me if I'm Irish or not? Because it was such a part of my identity. I think when you grew up in the 90s as a Catholic from West Belfast, like that was everything, your Irishness. And I felt that was being taken away from me. But I'm proud of it now. And I think I'm part of a generation that doesn't mind, both sides of the divide are very happy to be called Northern Irish. I mean, obviously there's still exceptions to that, but I think people are leaning into that new Northern Irish identity. So no, I'm happy with that. I still say I'm Irish when when I'm abroad, but if I'm talking to people, I'm sort of that proudly, yeah, I'm from Northern Ireland. And I recognize that there's a difference between people up north and people down south, and I'm proud of my upbringing and proud of where I come from. So yeah, I'm happy to say that.
And throughout the book as well, you touch on some issues that are current here in the North, for instance, the mental health crisis, LGBT plus issues, and women's reproductive health. Is that something that you notice changing attitudes to when you return home?
Yeah, well, certainly among the younger generation, and it's really heartening to see that there's this whole group of young people that are really concerned about things like housing and women's health and LGBTQ plus issues, and they don't want to vote along tribal lines like their parents did, and I think that's a really positive thing. And I think even in older generations, I'm seeing that more and more. Certainly my parents and their friends, that tribalism it's not the main thing anymore. They don't care. They want a government that works for them, that works for the people, that really addresses social issues. And of course, you're always going to get areas where that's not the case. But on the whole, I think that we're moving on, that progress has been made. So yeah, I think things are changing for the better, slowly.
Towards the end of the book as well, you discuss life in London, particularly at the time of the Brexit referendum. Now, you're since living in France, and I think you could fairly be described as a Brexile, someone who has moved to Europe as almost as a result of Brexit. Would you say that is an accurate description?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie, we moved here for the cheap wine and the cheese mainly. It's a great place to bring up kids, and London it's just not affordable really if you've got a family. But the atmosphere definitely changed. I mean, I was in London for 12 years and we loved it. It was such a great city, and there was such a high and a real sense of unity after the 2012 Olympics. And then just in the run up to Brexit and afterwards, it just, everything changed. There was this shift in the way people spoke about people who weren't English, spoke about immigrants. And I noticed that as well in just some of the things that, educated peers and colleagues would say to me, is Northern Ireland in a different time zone? Or, there is no division between Northern Ireland. They didn't recognize that. They didn't know that there was, they didn't know anything about partition. They didn't know anything about Britain's role in shaping Ireland's fate. And I didn't think that was acceptable, that sort of level of ignorance. And it really bothered me. And I just thought, I don't want to be part of this. And also on practical level, I don't want to have to queue every time I go to the airport and stand in a huge passport queue, which I've seen happen, So no, we were keen for something new anyway. And I think Brexit was the thing that just nudged us to go. But, I'll always love London. It is a great place.
And what would be the one thing that you would hope a reader of your book takes away from the story?
I want them to see that Northern Ireland, despite the unique set of circumstances, the unique political circumstances that we have, it's like anywhere else. You know what I mean? It's a great city. There's a great sense of humor, dark sense of humor the people share, and there's a friendliness to the place, and it's got a great music and cultural scene. And I think all these things are overlooked because all you ever see is the troubles, and even with friends and family from the Republic, from watching every night in the news, all of the negative stuff, they still have those prejudices, they still find it hard to shift those negative attitudes. So I just want to show people the other side, and that, that kind of, I don't know, the mundaneness of normal life continues even in the most bizarre circumstances. So I guess that's the thing, to show the two sides of Northern Ireland. Like, yes, it was mad, bonkers at times, but life did go on, and being a teenage girl is horrible and complicated no matter where you live. So yeah, I hope they have a better understanding of Northern Ireland, and they see a bit more of the humanity of the place.
And throughout the book as well, you make reference to a number of places within West Belfast, for instance, going for ice cream in Fusco's, down to Long's for a fish supper. What would
Are
be
they still there, by the way?
They're still there, yes.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that.
What would be the one thing that you miss most about living in the west of the city?
Freddy's Kitchen, is that still there? I love
It is indeed. It's still going strong.
oh man, the sweet and sour chicken balls, you can't beat them. I loved it there. Oh yeah, and we used to go to summer schemes in an Andytown Leisure Centre, which it has a big slide now, doesn't it? One of those big
Was
water
indeed.
slides.
If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll actually see me trying them out.
Oh, oh, listen, I feel like if we've left the area too soon, I missed all the good stuff. We moved out before it hit its peak. Yeah, Anytime Leisure Centre, that was always great. But yeah, Freddy's Kitchen, that was the big thing. So if I ever come, when I ever get back to the city, it's a bit hard with the pandemic to get back as much these days. But I'll definitely make my way west.
And at least your parents are in East Belfast now. We now have the glider that connects East and West. So
that's true.
All the more easier for you to get across as well. But this is a fantastic book and it's a fantastic story. Would you like to see anything else come of it? For instance, a stage play or a film or a series?
I mean, who knows? I'm open to everything. My mum said if it ever makes the small screen, she's like, I want Julie Walters to play me now. There's no other woman, so you tell them that. Oh, listen, I'm just enjoying the response at the minute. It's so much more than I expected. And what's really pleased me is that, it's being read by people of every demographic. It's being read by people in the South and in the UK, and everyone's seeing Northern Ireland differently and learning a bit more about it and relating to it, and it's just really lovely to see. So I'm just buzzing still from all of that, and then we'll see what's next. But yeah, it's been great.
Well, Alix, it has been lovely to chat with you, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book, and our review should be online soon. But The Troubles With Us is published by Fourth Estate, and it is available in all good bookshops now.